Welcome, everybody. This morning we are here for the 8 signs of ineffective managers and how we can fix them. David Liddell is presenting. David is the founder and CEO of Liddell Consulting Group. He has been working with leaders and businesses for over 20 years, helping people maximize their productivity, effectiveness, and career and business growth. So here he is. I'm going to keep admitting people. Again, everybody, we are recording today. So at the end of this, you will receive a copy of the presentation. Dave, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Yes, we'll make sure you get the a copy of the PowerPoint so that you don't have to take notes. We'll send it to you, and the recording will be made available if you want to share it with others. Welcome. Happy Friday to everybody. Great to have you on board here today. This particular topic I thought was kind of interesting. I'm often asked, how do we know if we had, how do we identify ineffective managers? How do we fix it? How do we address it? And it's a little bit of a provocative title, but certainly we could have chosen a stronger term, maybe incompetent, but I thought that one was a little strong. I think ineffective is probably the key here. And you can use this for yourself if you want to have a little sanity check to see how well you're doing. Perhaps you're looking at it through a different lens. You're looking at other managers, leaders within your business and wondering, how are we doing there? But certainly it can be used in any way. Really, it's just trying to dial in, be more effective, and finding those, perhaps just fine-tuning your capabilities or helping your business. So I'm going to dive in because we have 8 items here. I can't spend a lot of time on each. So it's roughly, I did the math, it's going to be about 5 minutes per. If you have questions, I'm going to reserve some time at the end. I'll try to get a few minutes in there. And if you do have anything specific, drop it in the chat. I can see there's a message in the chat right now, and Lori's going to monitor that, and she can interrupt me at any point to answer any questions as we go along here. So let me just dive in. So these are the 8 things, the 8 areas that we've identified as being areas of ineffectiveness with managers: poor communication, leadership, adaptability to change, a big one, certainly. The ability to develop relationships, a lot of that relates to trust. Task management and production, they go together, but they're a little bit different as they define them here. And then of course, poor developer of others. We got to make sure we are helping others grow in their role, and then neglecting your own personal development, and that is oftentimes just a pure lack of self-awareness. So let me dive into the first one here, and there's going to be 2 slides per. I'll talk a little bit about what to look for, and then I'll talk about a remedy, and usually the remedy is going to be the opposite of what we have here, but you'll see how this flows as we go. First one, poor communicators. My rule of thumb on communication is listen twice as much, use your anatomy, 1 mouth, 2 ears. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think what happens sometimes, we really fail to listen to people. And there's a difference between listening and hearing noise. Listening is really understanding. Certainly part of that is looking for those non-verbal cues, meaning, are you paying attention to your audience? Do they feel heard? And I think that's something we want to think about relative to connecting people, making sure they feel part of the conversation. The third bullet here around perspectives is, are you really seeking to understand the individual? And that's where, if we want to validate or listen, it doesn't mean you have to agree and you have to take people's advice or suggestions. It means people need to be validated in terms of what they're saying. Do they feel heard and listened to? The 4th bullet here around negative body language. If you want people to engage you, if you want to be viewed as an effective communicator, you need to be open. Body language like this, crossing your arms as an example, is closing people off. It might not seem, you might say, well, I was cold that day. All right, well, suck it up and don't be cold that day, or don't feel like you're cold that day. You've got to make sure your body language is welcoming so people can engage you and feel that you're open. Certainly communicating effectively. The last one here is really kind of a mechanical sort of thing in some respects, But in terms of how you communicate, how you articulate your thoughts, how you share your ideas, are people on board? And you want to come across with confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. When you notice people as being overly confident, that's oftentimes a sign of complete lack of confidence. What we want is we want to be sure about what we're thinking, where we want to go. We want to be able to share our thoughts clearly and get people on board. And a big chunk of that is allowing people to ask questions, challenge even. And as long as you're open to that, that's going to work. So let me talk a little bit about the remedy. And as I said earlier, it's probably a mix of just one second here. I want to shut something down. There we go. It's a mix of really taking time to think about what experience do I want to create for the people around me? Do I want to be viewed as a good listener? What does that mean? What are the behaviors that will allow that to happen? You also want to consider emotional intelligence. And what that simply means is, are you aware of your own emotions relative to what's happening? Do you have self-awareness, situational awareness? And are you evaluating or assessing what's going around you as you're communicating and receiving information? And this is a really critical piece, because if we don't think about that in a way that allows us to grow, people don't want to listen to us. So I think we have to think about that. So let's make sure the number one thing is we figure out how to communicate effectively, listen twice as much as speaking, and things will go very, very well. All right, let's talk about weak leadership capabilities. Now, I can't hit every aspect of leadership here because leadership is such a broad topic, but let me hit some of the big ones that I see every single day. The first one on the list, trust. We have to build trusting and respectful relationships with the people around us. What some leaders do is, well, depending on people's style, what some leaders do is confuse trust with people need to like me. And that's secondary. If they like you, that's great. That's the icing on the cake. We want to make sure that people trust you and respect you first. They don't even need to like you a whole lot. And now I'm saying that with a little tongue in cheek, but ideally, if they trust you, then they are going to want to work with you. They're going to listen to you more effectively. They're going to want to, one of the biggest things is we hear about when people leave companies, top talent, they oftentimes leave the manager. And a big piece of that is trust and respect. The second piece is thinking about each team member's responsibility for accomplishing objectives. What happens there is oftentimes expectations are set by the manager, but not as clearly as they think. They think it is clear, but not necessarily clear. If we go back to the first round of communication, if we're shut down and we're not allowing people to engage us fully, when we're sharing expectations, and if they're not clear, there's a good chance your team members, or in many cases your direct reports, will not question you. They will not challenge you. So we have to make sure we are absolutely clear with responsibilities. And the third bullet here, authority. If you want to frustrate your people, if your goal is to frustrate your people, give them responsibility without them understanding what their authority level is. I'm not suggesting you give them carte blanche, full authority, but you have to let them know what is their authority. Then they know where their limits are, what they can do, can't do. You want people to take some degree of risk, calculated or relative to their role, to push the envelope, to try new things, to innovate. So the best way we can do that is through giving them responsibility with the appropriate amount of authority that is well understood. The fourth bullet here around vision, I mentioned it earlier around the communication component, but if we're not, we don't have the ability to truly share or translate what we want, where we're headed, what we're doing into actionable activities, tasks, strategies, it's going to be impossible. People might understand conceptually where you want to go, but do they know how to turn that into action and goals and responsibilities themselves? We want to create an environment where people understand what they need to achieve. And then, and again, the last one, this is probably one of the biggest ones that so many people struggle with, is delegating responsibility. And if we don't delegate responsibility, guess what happens? You, the manager, becomes the bottleneck. You know it. You've been there, I'm sure, many times. And one of the biggest things I hear is, I don't have the, or, many things. I don't have the people around me to delegate to. It's easier for me to do it. It's faster. Yes, it is, but you hit a point where your scalability ends and you become what I call, you get wrapped up in the vortex and you can't get out. And it creates a negative spiral that you don't want to get into. So let's learn how to delegate effectively. And done well, it energizes your people. It makes them feel more part of the business. They're growing. And guess what? You have more time to do some of the more strategic or other things you have not been able to get to. And I call those the big rocks. You got to put those in your calendar first. And if we don't, that's a problem. So let's talk about a remedy. Clearly, I think, there are two things I've highlighted here. We got to think about building our relationship, our leadership through trust building. If we do that, absolutely, you're going to see a huge benefit. And that comes through clear communication, your integrity, essentially leading by example, and ensuring that you're building those healthy relationships that allow you to share responsibility and trust people that they'll get the job done. And then, of course, translating your approach, your vision, where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? And I don't care if you're the CEO, you're a senior level leader, mid-level, even frontline leader. People have to need to know where you want to go, what you want to achieve, and what that means to them. And if you can't communicate that, a problem. So let's learn how to communicate that effectively and get people on board. Change, big one for a lot of people. What's interesting about change, and I've been doing a lot of work on that recently because so much changes around us so quickly. If we think about what's happening in the world today, AI alone, look how quickly things are changing with AI. And some people are a little freaked out about AI. Is it going to take my job? It's not. It's going to change your job, likely. It's a tool today. Could it evolve into something massive? Of course it can, because we know the capabilities today. But it's still, it's in its infancy. If we can learn how to leverage technology in general and adapt to the change coming at us, it's a whole lot easier. But ineffective leaders struggle with change, and they really do. They freeze up, they can panic. They don't know how to deal with problems that come at them. And a problem isn't necessarily the run-of-the-mill daily problem. It could be something around the world is changing around them. Customer and client requirements are changing around them. The economy shifts. What does that mean? We have to adapt to it. So we don't want to panic and freeze. And that goes to the second bullet about getting stuck in reactive mode. Reaction is for me, there's reacting and there's responding. Responding has thought to it. It's typically structured, pragmatic. A lot of the issues have been or at least explored, and then a realistic approach is put forward. So we have to think about the reaction, and reaction oftentimes comes with emotion, and we all react to a certain degree. We got to turn that reaction into a response that is going to be productive. So it's a lot of this is certainly mindset. We have to think creatively. Obviously, we can't, what got us here may not get us there in the future. And there's a lot of reality that you can see it. Every industry I work in, every organization I work within, there is something. There's headwinds, or there's always challenges. Your competition wants to beat you, no question. You want to beat them. Competition's healthy. It's a good thing. It keeps us energized. It keeps us focused on the future. But we have to be able to change and adapt as we move forward. Certainly, we got to be we got to take a little bit of risk, and risk is relative. So for those of you on the call here today, when you think about risk, it's relative to your environment, your business, your industry. An AI company might take a lot of risk, right? They're building something new. They're forging a new path. Versus a more traditional, perhaps an insurance company, which tend to be a little more traditional and more thought thoughtful about how they move forward. So those are two industries where risk means different things. And then, of course, there's a reluctance to involve others in problem solving. What I have found is that managers who do well engage others, look for ideas, at least seek out ideas, others' opinions. And when you don't do that, yeah, you might have the answers, but you may not. And a big piece of problem solving is you have to get others on board. So let's make sure we're thinking about that. So let me go to the remedy. We do have to think about resilience. I think that's a big deal in our leadership and management realm today. Resilience really is your ability to move forward. And of course, I've done other webinars and we talked about resilience. Really the idea there is there's adversity, there's challenge, and it's a lot of it is your ability to emotionally absorb what's happening and push through the back end, bringing people with you. So, with the idea of how are we going to solve it, what's new, what's different, but it's all about getting people together to solve problems together, because I say two heads is always better than one, because you're going to get, it might take a little longer possibly, but I think on the whole, on the average, you're going to come up with a better solution and a better approach. All right, number 4 is about relationship building skills. And this is not just with direct reports. This is also with all people in the organization. Think about a 360 view. If you think about your direct reports, you have a responsibility to them. They're accountable to you. Your peers, there is a cross-functional nature there. The value of your business cuts across all the different functional areas of your business. So you want to have relationships cross-functionally. If you're a project manager, you're going to have a lot of different relationships, very critical. And then you have to make sure at a senior level you're building, for the people who you report to, that you're building strong relationships there as well. And without thinking about this in a 360 view, you might be missing something. So let's just talk about this in terms of some of the areas to look out for. Let's talk about the first item here, which is about recognizing that words matter. What you say is important. More importantly, how you say it is important. And we have to think about how our words and actions do impact others. And everything we do, everything we say has an impact. So if you think about, we talk about making a good impression or leading by example. You lead by example every single day, whether you intend to or not. If you're in a management position, people report to you, you are in the spotlight. People are looking at you. They're looking at your moves. They're looking at how you speak to others, how you treat others. In terms of this particular topic, I always think about what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? I don't want to get too morbid here, but on your headstone, what would you like people to say? Hey, was really good with words, but made people feel like crap. Okay, I don't think you want that. You probably want something more along the lines of an impactful person who created a great environment for people to thrive. That might be a better one. So think about the legacy you want to leave behind. The second bullet here around consistency, I think that's critical. If you think about, we oftentimes gravitate or we build relationships differently with different people. And I think it's very important that you are consistent across the board with all your relationships, meaning how you treat people. Be very careful of not to treat different levels in the organization differently. I've heard, I do a lot of 360 work and, 360 at surveys and assessments. And one of the things I hear is, well, this person speaks differently to their peers and boss versus their direct reports. They're more condescending to the direct reports. You don't want that. It's noticed, whether you intend to or not. So you've got to be open-minded, or at least aware of how you approach people. And then how you think about how you treat your direct reports fairly across the board. People want consistency, and they want consistency in your moods. Think about that as well. We all have good moods, bad moods, meaning good days, bad days. Some of us are very good, even keel, regardless of what's going on. Stress can get to us. Just be aware that stress can be a dangerous thing and can it can create an unlevel playing field. You don't want people to come in walking on eggshells, worried about what your mood's going to be. The third bullet here about criticizing people, I'm going to give you an example of this one. It was very interesting. I won't say which company that I was working for at the time, but we would be in meetings, and my boss would, on a regular basis, dress down, criticize one of his peers in our meeting. And I thought that was bad form, because what it did is, well, one, I wondered what he was saying. We all his direct reports, we were wondering what he would say about us when we weren't around. And it didn't come across as behaviors that show good integrity. So what we want to do, we do critique people in our own minds, but we don't want it to be outward. And what's really important here is, it's not the person, it's their behaviors that we might be looking for. So if you have an employee who's struggling, work with them to help them develop and grow. And it's about the behavior. They're probably a good person, but they're struggling with some behavior as well. I think I talked about the fourth bullet already, the emotional piece. And then the last one was the team success. We want to think about, it's not about the manager, it's about the team succeeding. If you think about the term servant leadership, the manager needs to work for the team. And I think of it in terms of creating a wonderful, thriving environment where people can succeed on their own, succeed as a team. That's a big piece of it, is looking at the whole team performance, the dynamics, the process, the behaviors, the relationships, and making sure it's working. When you get a team working together, well, I'll tell you what, it makes a huge difference, and it takes the pressure off the manager. So just kind of a recap here in terms of building a relationship. It takes a little bit of art. It certainly takes reflection. But what we have to think about here is if we think about building relationships with individuals, with teams, it does take a certain amount of focus on, intentionality is probably a better word, intentionality from the manager. You have to think about each relationship on its own. Everyone's wired a little bit differently. And then you have to look at what's actually happening. You have to have your radar up. What's really going on around us? And are we achieving? Are we thriving? And as long as you're thinking in those terms, you will end up with a thriving, vibrant team where each individual can grow as well. All right, I think we're doing pretty well here on time. I'm just got a clock over here, so I'm watching it. So let's talk about ineffective task management. The next two go together, but they are unique in their own right. So the ineffective task managers, they really don't ask for help. And it's not because, maybe sometimes it's ego, but oftentimes it is they don't want to appear to be weak. I don't want to ask for help. And even around delegation, are they delegating enough? But they won't ask help when they need it because they don't want to appear to be weak. And that's if you're stuck, if you're new, if you're creating, if you're evolving, growing, changing, it's not always easy, and it's okay to ask for help. Procrastination is a absolute killer. And if you think about, I think some of us are natural procrastinators. I tend not to be. That's just, and maybe I've grown. Maybe I was when I was younger. I just like to get things done. Let's move forward. Some of the terms you're going to hear out there these days are fail fast. Obviously, if you're going to fail at something, that's okay. You can learn from it, but don't agonize. Don't draw it out. Don't procrastinate. Look at the big picture, move forward, and just get her done. If you fail, you learn, and it's a wonderful learning opportunity. What we have to also think about, if we think about the team environment, is work, or the quality of our work. Some of us just like to move through the day and get it done, and there's maybe too much of good enough. We have to set an example that sets the standard. I think every organization has a quality standard of some kind. And whatever that is, whatever your quality standard is, but make sure you understand it, you share it, you talk about it, and you live up to it yourself in terms of leading by example. And then the last bullet here is simple. Don't share, as a manager, when mistakes happen, you own them. You own all of them. Now, if you have to talk to an employee about because they made the mistake, that's fine. Pull them aside privately, talk about the challenge, how to figure it out, what you'll tolerate, what you won't. But in public, you own it. You've set the standard, you've created the environment, it's your team. Make sure that, when issues go sideways, you take the blame. And blame might be strong, but let's use another word. Take the ownership. Whether it's it could be, I don't know what happened there, but I'm going to figure it out. That's what we need. We need strong people who are going to take ownership in terms of understanding what happened and how to move forward. And as they say, as it's said, if you're not part of the solution, you're absolutely part of the problem. So the remedy here is, let's make sure we foster collaboration, we delegate. We've got to get more people involved. And oftentimes when there's challenge issues, or even just day to day, you need a strategy, you need a plan, you need strategies, you need tactics. You need to break that down into its pieces. People need to understand how they're part of executing, get them involved. But I think, going back to what I said, take ownership. You own it. It's all about you. All right. I think we're still moving here. This is good. Let's talk about ineffective production. I said that was a little bit of the former, but slightly different. So let's talk about decision making here. Many people struggle with making decisions. They overanalyze. Everything has to be perfect. Every bit of information has to be gathered before you make a decision. There's a couple things I want you to think about around decision making. A poor decision is far better than a non-decision. You cannot learn from a non-decision, meaning not making the decision, sitting on it. It's a bad idea. If you make a poor decision, you can learn from it and you will not make that mistake again. Another piece of a non-decision is, especially at the highest levels of the organization, people, both your boss as well as people around you, your direct reports, they are waiting for you to make a decision. Oftentimes there are employees, and I hear it all the time, things aren't happening fast enough. Why is it taking so long? Why is there so much red tape? And there may not be red tape. It might be sitting on someone's desk and they're paralyzed. They're stuck. They don't know what decision to make. Seek out advice. Make the decision. Just get it done. Move forward. It goes back to what I said earlier. Fail fast. It's okay. Now, if you're in an organization that doesn't tolerate any mistakes, well, okay, that's a challenge. There are very few that do that these days. That's the way we learn. That's the way we grow. Waffling, kind of the same thing, but there is a point in time where we have to just move forward. And waffling for me is all about seeking advice from different people, getting wrapped up in pleasing people, or worrying about the ramifications or the politics. And I'm not suggesting in larger organizations, politics don't matter. However, I want you to think about something for a minute. Positive outcomes, results are primary. At the end of the day, provided you're not hurting anybody in the process, achieving the result is the most important thing. So you want to make informed decisions. And at some point in time, you just absolutely need to pull the trigger. Now, I'm speaking to kind of these second two bullets together, but fail to achieve reliable results. Well, we have to understand first the results. What are we trying to achieve? Many times I will ask business leaders, whether it's a large department, an entire company, what are your goals? How are you going to measure success? What needs to happen for you to feel good about your success or to know that you're succeeding? And you'd be amazed at the answers I get sometimes. Now, most of the time it's, well, yeah, we know what we want. We measure some of these things, But I think if you can make it absolutely crystal clear, what is it that we are trying to achieve? What the leading indicators and lagging indicators will allow us to feel good, to be successful. And one of the items here that I'll just talk about is if we think about we have the Super Bowl coming up in a couple days. Imagine if we at the very beginning of the game they announce that they're not gonna show the scoreboard, or they're not gonna or they say we're not gonna score this game. Well, that makes the game pointless in the eyes of everybody watching. We have to have some kind of score. Now, what that looks like is really dependent upon what you want it to be, what the organization needs, how people are going to feel good about it. So if you think about producers, what they do, or good producers, in this case, poor producers, the results aren't reliable because they're not measuring anything. So let's make sure that we have clarity on where we're going, what we want to accomplish, and let's have a certain speed in terms of how we're moving forward, and the decisions are coming with it. So let's look here at the remedy. You'll notice at the top in red, the appearance of busyness does not guarantee the achievement of results, and that's absolutely true. I have met a lot of busy people in my lifetime, and then ask them a very simple question: is, well, okay, how are you doing? How are you succeeding? How are you performing? And I'll get the answer, good. Well, that's great. What's the evidence that supports that? So we have to have evidence, we have to have reliability, we have to be able to be clear about how we're going to get there. And production is always about the final result, the outcome. And if we can understand it, we can achieve it. All right, we're doing good on time here. Hopefully I'm not going too quickly for you, but I am very sensitive. I do want to finish on time today so that I don't hold anybody up. All right, poor developers of others. This one, for me, is probably one of the most important. We think about coaches in our lifetime, mentors in our lifetime. We remember the managers that we've had in the past who were wonderful motivators and took care of us. Those who struggle with motivating others really don't think about growth opportunities for their people. They think about the achievement component, and that is important, as we just talked about a moment ago, but they may not think about, well, how can I help people grow and learn and challenge them the right way, in an effective way, so that they can grow. Learning opportunities could be inside the organization, new challenges, new responsibilities, new authority. It can be outside the organization, working with peers outside their company. It could be training, development, which can also happen inside. But we've always got to be looking for, what are the capabilities that the people around me have, and how can I help them grow and achieve their goals? Second bullet here: disregard the goals and aspirations of the team. I think we have to consider that it really goes hand in hand with the first bullet, but we want to be sure that we are clear, we are dialed into where people want to go, what they want to do with their lifetime, their career. And look, everyone's a little different. We all, as we think about getting our first job, then we might get married, we might have kids, we may not. It's all dependent on your life and where you want to be and where you want to go. We have to be dialed into that a little bit, so that we understand what people's potential are, full potential is, and what it is that they want, because the willingness component is really, really important. This third one sounds a little divisive around breaking down versus building up, and I don't see it very often. But when I do see it, it's typically unintentional, because the manager might not really be understanding what they're doing, or how to build a team, or how to build a strong and healthy organization. And it's usually done through a lot of critique. Now, what's really important to recognize here is critiquing, looking for opportunity for growth, development, looking for issues, looking for failures. That is important. But if we're only doing that, all we're doing is breaking down. We have to remember that the development of others is also affirming the positives. And that doesn't mean hand-holding and coddling. I'm not saying that. What I mean is that people need to know when they're succeeding, when they are winning. It is okay to say, you did a great job at that. That's the exact type of behavior we're looking for, or that's the exact type of performance you're looking for. What you recognize verbally gets repeated by people, and that's a human nature thing. So we have to couple these two. If we don't, then really all you're doing is you're breaking people down. And there's nothing wrong with a little breakdown. It's people need to, they do need a mirror to know what's going on. The fourth bullet, I think I've kind of covered that, but I think it's important that the motivational piece for people, every person is motivated differently. And we think about fundamentally, I ask simple questions in all my trainings and speaking engagements. What motivates your people? And oftentimes people will throw out things like, oh, they want a challenge, they want money, so on and so forth. There's lots of things. Money in itself, I just want to be clear, is a motivator, but it doesn't last very long. As soon as you give somebody a raise, what do they want? They want another raise, right? So it's it's validation of their performance. But I think what we want to do is show the appreciation through recognition, telling them. And it doesn't have to be public. It can be private. Many people do like it private anyway. Let's recognize for what they're doing well, and that type of behavior will be repeated, and they will recognize you as a strong and healthy leader in terms of developing and motivating. And the last one, you see this sometimes. You'll see, there is a rumor mill sometimes. There is gripes in organizations. Sometimes things bug employees, and sometimes it's the water cooler talk. You might hear two employees chatting away. What you want to do as a manager, you do not want to get wrapped up in that. Every business, every organization, every industry has its challenges. You're not going to keep people satisfied and highly motivated 24/7. It's not going to happen. What's really important is not to get wrapped up in the nonsense and the noise. Managers, leaders, what they do is they create environment. And if there's issues that you're hearing about things, understand them. You don't have to say, no, you're wrong, you can't think that way. Ask the question, well, tell me what's going on. Let's see if we can figure this out. How can you be part of the solution? We have to be positive, not unrealistically positive, because we do deal with the harsh realities of the world around us. But being pessimistic drags everybody down, and we do not want to get caught up in that negativity that can happen. So always keep that on your radar. If you hear it, you sense it, you feel it, address it, talk about it, and let's give people a clear understanding of, yeah, maybe there is a challenge, maybe there's a real issue, but it's our job to move forward. It's our job to figure it out, because if we don't, our competition will, and we're dead. A little over the top, but you know what I mean. So the remedy, really just what I said. Let's promote opportunity. Let's promote people in terms of their ability to grow and to learn. If there are promotional opportunities within the business, great, promote from within. But I think what we need to think about here is we have to create a strong and healthy culture where people can thrive and grow. If we do that, people will. Now, some people will accelerate faster because they might be better self-starters, but let's think about dealing with everybody, different personalities, different wants and needs. And our goal is to get everybody to rise. And when we do, it creates a better environment for everybody. All right, I think I'm well ahead of my time here, so we'll have plenty of time at the end, I think. The last one is personal development. Neglect their own personal development, and for me, that a lot of that, it actually speaks to the second to last bullet around self-awareness. We have to be able to build some sort of mechanism. Some of us are very self-aware, naturally self-aware. Maybe some of us are overly self-aware, which can create some confidence issues. But most of us have a certain degree of self-awareness. There is a small percentage of the population that does not. Now, some people will take that and turn that into, well, that person's a narcissist. And that's not necessarily true. What it might mean is they just don't have that ability. It's not part of their persona, their personality, their ability. When I work with people who struggle with self-awareness, we create mechanisms, manual mechanisms, meaning you need to seek out feedback on a regular basis to see how you're doing versus reading it yourself. That might be a mechanism. But a big part of that is we have to have, we all have to think about our own development, our own growth. If we're working on ourselves, people notice. And when we're changing for the better, relative to what's happening around us, people notice. It's a good thing. So let's just talk a little bit about it. Some of the other bullets here. Don't build enthusiasm amongst team members. I think it's important, not unrealistic enthusiasm, but we got to be positive. And I think if we're working on ourselves and thinking about our own moods, our own, how we deal with stress, we want to bring people up, especially when times are difficult. And every business goes through difficult times. Sometimes when things are thriving, things just work. Well, that's easy. It's easy to be a manager then, or easier, not easy, but it's easier. But when things are tough, things are challenged, there's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. That's when you have to build up, you have to build people up and be thinking about how can I be enthusiastic in the right way. Certainly giving up easily. Yeah, that's a big one. It's like, oh, I can't be bothered with that. We don't want that. Can be defensive with criticism. That's a huge one. I'll notice that people will immediately put up a guard, put up a wall when someone says, well, I'm not sure about that, or ask a question about something. That makes it clearly obvious that you do not want to learn, you do not want to grow, that you are shut down. The more you can open up and be a little bit vulnerable, if we go back early on about trust, vulnerability breeds trust. It really does. And listening to people, validating people, understanding what their questions are, critique might be, that's fine. It's just words, it's language, it's information for you. You don't have to do anything with it. But if you can validate what people are saying and take something from it, great. It's up to you. But make sure you're being heard. And they're not criticizing you, they're criticizing what's happening. You might be in charge of it. Yeah, you might take it personally. Try not to. And then, of course, the last one, learn from mistakes. If we can learn from our own mistakes, great. But I see managers and leaders make the same mistake over and over and over, and people scratch their head. They wonder, what is going on? How can they not see this? So if you take a combination of all these things, that's usually what happens. All right, so the last one here under the remedy, we have to, we can't really help others unless we're helping ourselves. And if we think about being open, being honest with ourselves, truly reflecting on what's happening, it's one of the most powerful things you can do as someone developing and growing in your role, is accepting responsibility, thinking about yourself, improving. And when the day comes along that you say to yourself, I'm good, I don't need to improve anymore, that's when it's over. There's not a day that I don't think about trying to fix something, improve something, and it's not a huge fix. It's not as if something's broken. Don't think of it in those terms. Think about adjusting the dials, fine tuning it, dialing it in, just like you might be, carving a sculpture. You want it just right. It might be that little piece you need to carve off that's going to make it better. The good news is you get to decide what it is. No one can tell you, but if you're not open, you're not ready, and you're not making advancements in your own personal development, it will be noticed and people will pass you by. Kind of a undesired byproduct. All right, so let me wrap up here. So we talked about ineffective managers and we talked about some of the remedies. Let me just recap what I think as the other side of the equation here. What do effective managers look like? And the first thing is it's more about supervising employees. Supervising employees really is, nobody appreciates it really to the degree that a true leader does. They look at employees as assets, the number one assets, as something to be invested in, being part of a team, being part of success. So it's really not about, even though people might have a title of supervisor, it goes well beyond that. Effective managers take responsibility. It's for ensuring there are results at every level. if you're not at the very top of the food chain, meaning CEO, you might be part of a department or a team. You have to think about the team results and your accountability to what those results mean to the entire company, how the team functions, what it produces, how each individual is doing. Are they succeeding? Can you measure the success of each individual? And the key word here is responsibility. I'm a manager. I own that. That is my responsibility. And if it's not happening, I need to take ownership. Effective managers are like successful coaches who develop teams that win championships year after year. For any Patriots fans on the call today, sorry, we don't happen to have that right now. Hopefully in the coming years we will. But think about this. As an effective manager, coaches help people grow, develop, and help drive people and teams beyond faster than they go on their own. Effective managers are also both talented, innate, meaning they have natural skills, and are skilled. They learn, and we have both. What's really important with this one is you have to recognize what you're naturally good at, where are your strengths. Don't only focus on, well, this is the stuff I want to work on. That's good. And sometimes a weakness really is just something holding you back. Those strengths, make sure you're clear on them, you hone them, you polish them. They are things that you rely on. Don't over rely on them, because sometimes an overused strength can become a weakness. But make sure you understand what your talents are and continue to learn to build your skills. Effective managers build trust with their peers and direct reports. We talked about that earlier. I don't think I have to speak more to that. Other than the fact that trust in itself it's the lubrication that drives everything. It makes things run smoothly. Just like in your car engine, you have oil. Without the oil, things seize eventually. Oil makes things run more smoothly. Trust is really the same thing with your relationships, with your teams, how things work. The stronger the trust, the more you can solve, the easier you can solve. Effective managers provide clear direction and guidance. Absolutely. Where are we going? Why are we going there? A big one of them is why. Why do we do this? Oftentimes, decisions will come down from the top without the why or the context as to why the decision was made or the direction that has changed. Make sure that you have an understanding of direction. Give the guidance. If you're not sure yourself, go ask. Your manager is not holding back on purpose. They just perhaps haven't shared it well enough or articulated it well enough. If you're not sure, you need to ask. Effective managers empower employees for growth. Empower, we've heard the term, employee engagement, empowerment, engagement, same idea. The word there's a smaller word in empower, the word power. You have implied power as a manager. Give them as much of that away, meaning delegate responsibility and authority as much as you can. You have to trust people to do it, which can be risky at times, but that's okay. Make sure you're empowering people. Give them your power away so people feel empowered. They can grow. They can thrive. You get everybody doing more of that, and a rising tide floats all boats. You rise with it. And then the final one here, accountability. We have to have accountability to outcomes, results. And that means a lot of different things in an organization. But I want to shift the thinking of accountability in terms of having to hold people accountable. I wrote a culture of accountability. A culture of accountability means you've created the environment, the standard, you've set the tone, that people feel accountable themselves to achieving the results they need to achieve. And you don't have to run around holding people accountable. It's not necessary. Those who don't do that, there's ambiguity, there's too much grayness, and people aren't sure what they're accountable to. So create that culture of accountability, and that will drive everything forward. All right. That is the end of today's session. We have a few more minutes left. I'm not sure if we have any questions. Lori,
we have a couple of things that came through. One, Mike just made a couple of really good comments.
Thank you, Mike.
One is that he says the biggest impact I've seen is how you behave and lead under stress leaves a lasting impression. And the other thing he said is making decisions are important, but don't allow your people to pass the responsibility to you. Your team should come with options, impacts, and recommendations, and seek endorsement, not what should I do.
Mike, great. I love both comments, especially the second one. I did not touch on that. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes, do not. When we think about responsibility and authority, it comes with a certain amount of decision making, and people are oftentimes afraid to make the decision because they go, "Well, it's my neck." Well, yes, that's part. That's part of growing and developing and taking risks. And spot on. If they're struggling with it, you've got to help them build that confidence. And exactly what Mike said, have them bring ideas and thoughts. If they're not sure, that's okay. They can talk with you about it, but don't make the decision for them. Push them, challenge them to make the decision. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful point. Good, Michael, thank you. Thanks.
And then another question that we got is a manager's fear of being surpassed a coachable issue, or what is the best way to handle somebody who has a low self-esteem?
Oh yeah. Well, that's going to be a nuanced, slightly nuanced answer. There's probably a few different ways. Let me first say, it's going to depend on the degree of an individual's self-esteem and what's behind that. And if it's someone who needs to be coached because they're challenged, let's say they're highly successful in some respects, but they're guarded, they don't want to allow anybody in. You have to go after their beliefs around what's causing that behavior, what is causing that potentially the low self-esteem. You can't just tell them, well, knock it off. It's not going to happen. It's deeply rooted in some beliefs that they have. So it is coachable. And that's the way I'd go at it. I would work with the individual, try to understand what's going on in their mind. And when I say beliefs, beliefs can be very simple, can be very minor, but it could be something as simple as, well, if I don't know everything, then I'm going to fail. Well, no, hire people around you who are smarter. Build your team up. You do not have to know everything. The CEO of a company does not know about every single aspect of how their business runs. They have people doing things that they have no part of. That's why we hire experts. So it would be, so the short answer is yes, it's coachable. The first question I always ask, is this person coachable? Are they open? Do they recognize the challenge they have? And if they do, then that's half the equation. That's the willingness part. If someone says, yeah, I can see it, I just don't know how to get past it, absolutely coachable. If someone says, no, this is the way I'm going to do it, and they're stuck, they're stuck in their ways, then you have another issue you have to deal with there. And that one's much more challenging because without the willingness, nothing else comes along.
Another question that came through kind of feeds into that, and then you
Yes.
all please speak up if you have other questions. I'm just reading these off. So what's the best way to know if leadership is actually the primary reason for holding a manager back?
I want to make sure I understand the question. So leadership in, let me just see. Could you read it one more time?
What's the best way to know if leadership is the primary reason for holding a manager back? I think they mean like senior leadership, top leadership, CEO.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Well, wow. I mean, usually that's pretty obvious. Usually if someone is being held back and it's coming from the top, essentially you're going to see telltale signs that individuals' ideas are not being valued, decisions are not allowed to be made. I mean, there's lots of different things that you can look at. It could be as simple as people being, and hopefully I'm answering this question correctly. People are being demotivated because they're not allowed to move forward. So it really a lot of that for me comes down to the culture of the business. And if I'm coaching the leaders, I'm going to help them change that environment. If I'm coaching the individual and having to manage up, I'm gonna push them to challenge, and challenge in an effective way. So it's that's kind of a big topic, because it really is dependent upon the leaders in the business, the culture of the business, and the history that comes with it. But either way, I'd come at it two different ways. If I saw that there was an issue within the organization at the very top, I would address that to say, look, you're holding your people back. You need to create a void in a good way that allows them to step up. If it's the other way around and I'm coaching from the bottom up, which can be more challenging, I said, look, you're going to have to challenge in a productive way to make sure they see that you're being held back. And sometimes when leadership is holding their people back, most of the time it's not intentional. They just don't know what's happening. Okay. Anything else, Lori?
Those are all the questions that appeared. So
Okay.
anybody else want to speak up?